Hey, this is Kerry Meier, and I feel fortunate to be a Jayhawk.
Hey, everybody, and welcome into another special edition of Haney and the Hawks, where we catch up with one of the all-time greats in KU football history, the all-time receptions leader of Kansas Jayhawk football, Kerry Meier. He's with us live in studio today, 916 Massachusetts, back for a KU game and your first taste of the new booth. So good to see you, my friend. How you been?
Yeah, Brian, have been great. Obviously, it's great to be back in the environment. It's been a few years, but obviously, it's always great to get back in the atmosphere and connect with individuals like you and the rest of the alumni and everybody that is here.
Man, that's so cool. And it's great to see that you're thriving, loving life up in New York City as a dietitian and clinician.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about your day to day now after football.
Yeah, so it's been a long route and a journey to kind of get to where I am here today. Once I left KU, was fortunate to get the opportunity to play professionally for a few years with the Falcons, and from there, was fortunate to get that opportunity. But things change. You're constantly doing kind of a pulse check about where you're at when you're professional, especially professional football. Ran into the injury bug when I was in Atlanta. Decided to step away from the game and completely got off the grid and went international and had a great opportunity to go explore another part of the country, another part of the country, but another part of the world and teach English in South Korea for a year. And throughout that time, just kind of did it, like I said, kind of a heat check to see where I was
Uh-huh.
at, personally, professionally, and found my way back into the realm of who am I becoming now, status post football, and found myself into the field of nutrition. Nutrition was something what is it was at its early stages collegiately, kind of coming onto the fold, and there was a great dietitian, sports nutritionist that KU had hired on, and Randy Bird, that kind of opened my eyes to the
Yeah.
field of nutrition. So once I took that time and went abroad and did some internal, kind of checks and balances of what's going on, what am I going to do? Who am I going to become next? I was gravitated towards this nutrition component because it's something I thoroughly enjoyed. So I was like, well, what does this dynamic look like, professionally? How can I get in that fold? So came back from South Korea and went back to school, got my master's in nutrition and exercise science. And from there, the whole journey kind of took off. So fast forward, 7 years now, living in New York City, working as a clinician in the healthcare space. So, what I do on a day-to-day basis is I customize nutrition for individuals with a slew of medical conditions. So, the field has changed dynamically as far as like the field that I'm playing on. So, you know,
We got a
from
fly in here. It's
I
like a
know
Mike Pence thing.
it's like a little,
he's,
a little
he's coming at you. Did
exactly.
K State send this fly in here?
Jeez, what's
Get him
going
out of here.
on? Get him out of here. But the field, going from a football field to, now being in a healthcare setting where, I'm taking care of all sorts of different dynamics as far as medical conditions, anything from, oncology patients to, people that have the inability to chew and swallow. So, I'm calculating, nutrition needs for pig tube feeds. So the dynamics are very different right now, but it's a reflection of me doing something I love, which is the nutrition component. So, on a day-to-day basis, it can range from a variety of different things for people that have acute needs, but also
Mhm.
people that have chronic needs. So, it's been an incredible journey and dynamic of getting through these elements of being a dietitian, becoming a technician in
Mm.
what I do, just like I was doing on the football field. It's crafting your practice over time. And I find myself doing the same thing in nutrition. So it's been a long journey, but as with anything, you kind of enjoy the steps along the way
Mhm.
to make it fulfilling. And the field of nutrition is changing dramatically, as all fields of nutrition, especially with AI and technology come into play. So it's always about recrafting and re-educating and learning and developing and adapting and changing as things go. I don't know what's going on.
For folks listening on the podcast, we're getting attacked by a fly in here. I realized when I described that a second ago, if you're not able to see it hovering around his face, you probably had no idea what we're talking about. But just bat him off
Yeah.
like he's a little
It's like a
defensive back,
defender,
and you're getting in
right.
position downfield to catch a pass versus Mizzou. Get off me, DB. That's fascinating stuff,
Yeah.
and I appreciate hearing your full journey to finding your field
Yep.
in the dietary realm because I feel like, and I don't want to get too deep on this, but football's a young man's game. And yet when it's what you've known your entire childhood and your collegiate years and
Yeah.
early professional years, I think for a lot of football players, when football is taken from them
Yep.
and the calls stop coming and they're no
Right.
longer on a roster, your identity has been tied up in that, and so it's hard to find what that next chapter is. So I
Yep.
love to hear
Mhm.
that you went on a big time journey all the way to South Korea. We had Todd Reesing in that chair a few weeks ago, and he took the 9 month sabbatical going to 6 different continents and kind of a different theme trip than what you took. But
Yep.
it's neat that you were able to find the next
Mhm.
chapter so quickly. And even though you had to go halfway around the world and ultimately
Right.
found your calling in coming home to this clinician's role, I think for some guys, they struggle in saying goodbye to football and finding the next thing. So it's interesting to hear the path you took to getting to where
Yeah.
you're at today.
So, Brian, adding to that, it's like I said, it's been a long journey
Yeah.
to get there, and it's only been 7 or 8 years, but it's felt at times like it's been an eternity. And that whole transition, it's it hasn't been smooth. And I don't looking back on it now, I'm grateful that it has not been smooth. Just like the transition coming here to the University of Kansas and get the opportunity to play here, it didn't go linear. It didn't go according to how I kind of envisioned it going. I
Yeah.
went from playing quarterback to getting presented this challenge of transitioning to a different position, something I never envisioned. It was the hardest thing I've ever done to that point in time in my career.
Yeah.
Transitioning from quarterback to wide receiver, it was not seamless. And even though, I think we're all blessed with different like aptitudes. So like physically, I was very, very blessed with a physical aptitude to grasp things quickly physically. That transition from quarterback to receiver made it seem like it was pretty seamless and easy, but everything that went on behind the scenes
Mm.
of diligent, dedicated work, 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 um, may have given that appearance that it was seamless and it was easy, but the transition from quarterback to wide receiver was a walk in the park compared to that transition from football to what's that?
Yeah.
And that idea of, the structure, the environment that you're in with any athletics, kind of, whether it's football, basketball, baseball, there's such a routine that you get into that's constructed and their calendars, your days, your hours, your minutes are set to where everything is so regimented. So you're instantly put onto this pedestal, and the routine that you have is so refined and it's so precise in everything that you're doing that you go literally from 1,000 to 0 real quick. And what happens after that? And that's that transition from expectantly collegiately to the real world, but take it to the next level. I mentioned that pedestal. You go professionally and you're on that pedestal there
Yeah.
where everything is so finite to all of a sudden, boom, it's gone. Where did that structure go? There's a lot of uncertainty that goes through that process. And I was fortunate, like I said, to have that opportunity to go international, to really dig in deep and kind of discern through, all right, well, what am I now? Who am I? I've got a lot of soul searching to go through, which is really, really difficult. And it's a really challenging component to go through that process. And it hurts and it's a struggle and it's real. And there's a lot of guys that go through that constantly question. And like I said, the transition now getting into being a clinician and be a dietitian, just like that transition from quarterback to receiver,
Yeah.
it takes a lot of hard work and there's a lot of dark days. But if you can stay optimistic, which I did throughout that time, and have great people that you can rely on to kind of put yourself into that circle to keep you above water and keep you floating and just give yourself a chance and stay optimistic towards that. It's given me that chance to be here today to
Yeah.
talk about what I'm doing now, to expand on experiences I had both here, collegiately and professionally. So, grateful for all those opportunities along the way, but that transition from athletics to the real world will hit harder than anything else that you'll ever go
Interesting.
through. And, one thing, looking back on my time here, and like I mentioned with those people that you have in your circle. So obviously one of those individuals was Coach Mangino, and there was I don't know how many years, probably for 5 straight years from my redshirt freshman year all the way up. He always would come into those team meetings and talk about if you think this is hard, wait till you get to the real world. That's where the hard work really begins." And
Yeah,
he wasn't lying. I mean,
yeah.
the dynamics of life and the situations and the realness of how things get, it hits really hard, and having people close to you that you can fall on to ask questions, to stay curious, to provide that support when you need it, makes those transitions and whatever dynamic that may be a little bit easier.
Man, what great insight. Love that.
Yeah.
And the number one topic on my list today to ask you about is that selfless transition you made from quarterback to receiver. And I tell people all the time, I challenge them, find a greater example in Kansas athletics history, not Kansas football, across the board, all 16 sports, of someone who humbly accepted another role and then went out and thrived to the point of individual and team success, unlike was probably even fathomable for anybody. And we're going to spend the bulk of our remaining time talking specifically about your KU career. But I always like to have a little bit of context on a player's background. And with you, you come from a great football family,
Mhm.
youngest of four boys, all four play collegiately, two of which go to K State,
Mhm.
one to Pitt State, pride of Pittsburgh, Kansas, number 13 rated quarterback nationally coming out of high school. But you decided to carve your own path. It would have been easy to go to the Little Apple
Mhm.
like two of your three brothers chose to do. You ruled them out pretty early, and it came down to Kansas and Texas A&M. Pick up the story from there and why it was that you felt compelled to write your own story.
So, growing up, having my oldest brother and then my second or third oldest brother both being, K-State players, so I grew up a lot watching a lot of K-State football. So I understood everything that K-State was about, and, no discredit to the university, the program. They did, you know, endless things for what they did as far as, like, their collegiate professions and going on professionally and things like that. So there's never been any bad blood towards K-State. I have, in a way it is blood, having brothers go there, it's deeper than just the color purple. It goes a lot. And, fortunately I was able to go and see a lot of those football games. So, I was their number one fan in the stands for a large period of my, childhood growing up, seeing a lot of football and seeing a lot of successful football. K-State during those years, they were Big 12 champs over and over and over. 11, 12 win seasons. So being part of that, blood of being a K-State, fan, I saw a lot of success. And, there's nothing better than going and winning and being part of a winning program and being part of that. So that dynamic was huge when it came to, as I'm coming up through the high school ranks and starting to evaluate what I want to do at the collegiate level. My first inclination was to play college basketball. And all the way up until like my sophomore year, was entertaining offer to go play at Oral Roberts in Tulsa, and then I had an opportunity to maybe go out to Long Beach State and play basketball out there. And then it was after my junior year, where I had some success in the football field, and this bigger offer started to come through. I was like, I think football is probably the best route for me to take.
Yeah.
And I was still so young because obviously played football growing up, but it was never something that I was like, this is what I want to do. I'm going to become a football player. It was never that element, but I knew and saw, a couple older brothers go through that phase, and like, they're setting themselves up for future success by going this route. And like I said, after my junior year, offers started coming through, one of those being K-State. And, I went on a visit to K-State, and, during that visit, I was referred to as the Little Meyer. And
Little Meyer.
not and it wasn't a slide or anything like that, but I looked at it that I was like, that's how I'm going to be viewed at K-State going forward. So I'm gonna be the Little Meyer. I'm always gonna be Shad or Dylan's younger brother. And that dynamic of understanding is like, well, that's not who I am. I'm not a little Meyer. I'm myself. I'm my own entity. That's who I'm going to become. I'm going to college for various reasons, but it's for my benefit, my career, and my dynamic of growing as a person. So, I going through the recruiting process. K State was a big one. Texas A&M was a big one, and KU was a big one. So I initially, didn't necessarily mark K-State off the list. I just put them down down the ranks a little bit, and I focused in on being, a Jayhawk or becoming an Aggie in Texas A&M. And, you know, things unfold for whatever reason it may be, whether it's a divinity power or, you know, whatever power you want to look at it. I had put all my eggs into one basket in Texas A&M, and I committed to them. I gave an oral commitment, and the night before I was going to sign, I called to let my recruiting coach know that this is it, and they had pulled their offer back because one of their quarterbacks had already committed the night before. So my offer wasn't there anymore. So my spot was gone. So, I took that as a sign. It was like, I'm destined to go to KU. And the Dylan, the other brother that went to K-State, he was incredibly, what do I say? He allowed me to see big picture about going to a school, and he looked at everything in such a different lens where he looked at everything beyond football. Like, look at all the dynamics that you're going to be in for the next 4 or 5 years and put yourself in that position where you want to be. And taking that little story
Mhm.
out of the mix about being, with Texas A&M and M and then pulling the offer, I looked at KU and I looked at everything surrounding what the football program is about. I looked at the town of Lawrence. I love Lawrence,
Yeah.
love every dynamic of it. I love the element of being a little bit closer to home. Lawrence is a little bit closer to home than obviously Texas A&M and obviously Manhattan. But I look at the big picture where I could like immerse myself in the community and how could I most belong where I was going to be, and Lawrence was that place. So that dynamic of finding that niche and me being able to come to KU, which was that in-state rival to K-State. Again, it's never going to be a slap at K-State. There's blood there. I'm always going to respect the program and what they did for our family, but coming to KU was the greatest thing that could ever happen in my career.
How about that? And that's why you said you feel fortunate
Yep.
to be a Kansas Jayhawk. So many elements to your story. I wish we had time to unpack, but I want to make sure we hit on the high notes. And so forgive me for fast forwarding through
Mhm.
your redshirt year
Yep.
and
Yep.
into the '06 campaign and all that, but had the heart procedure, took the medical red
Mhm.
shirts. By the way, everything's good 20 years
Yeah,
later.
that was, I quickly matured
Yeah.
at that point, as being an 18-year-old and being diagnosed with a heart condition after never having any symptoms, signs or symptoms growing
Yeah.
up, was a complete reality check. So,
Wow.
I grew up real quick throughout that process, but obviously, again, being fortunate, coming to KU at that point in time, it was one of a few institutions across the entire country that did extensive cardiovascular screenings, and
Man,
fortunately, KU was one of those places.
you were meant to be here.
Yep.
No doubt.
Yep.
And then was it '06 then that you became roommates with Todd Reesing?
It would've been '07.
'07, you're
Yep.
roommates with Reesing, okay.
Yep, yep,
He
yep.
was telling me about that dynamic, and obviously, we all know about your places in history respectively, him as the all-time passing leader, you as the all-time receptions leader. You touched on everything that went into that transition, what looks so seamless rather, to the rest of us, but all the hard work that went into it. It starts though with a mindset to accept a role change. And so again, I'm fast forwarding through some of your story, but take me to the moment when you knew Todd was going to be the quarterback, a guy that was your friend, your teammate, your roommate, but you still have so many God-given abilities as an athlete, so many skill sets that you can help this team win games. Who initiated that conversation? Position coach, head coach, whatever. And then what was your mindset? Because in order to achieve it physically, it had to start between the
Yep,
years that you were going to humbly accept a new role
yep,
and not just get by,
yep,
but thrive.
yep. So, this all came into the mix, through training. It didn't even start in training camp. I think throughout the off season, through the summer conditioning, we had a new staff that came in with a new offense. Um, and, Todd came from a similar offense that he ran in high school that was being implemented here. Something a little bit different for me, but he went out and executed throughout the offseason, and you could see he has this aura and confidence around him that people just gravitate towards. And call it confidence or cockiness, but he has a swagger about him that you want to be in the environment of. And he can come off a different way in the sense that, this guy, he's a little put offish, but in our dynamic in our locker room, that's what we needed. And we needed that as Coach Mangino called him, that spark, and then he called him Sparky. But he needed a spark. There's a new kind of element, environment, energy that's coming about, and he was this little burst, this little catalyst that came in that people gravitated towards, and he brought a completely different dynamic to the quarterback position. So I saw it early when he got here. It wasn't his first day of off-season conditioning because that could say a completely different story, and Todd could probably pick up on that one. But once we got away from and strength and conditioning was not his cup of tea. But when you stepped on the field and we started talking X's and O's and playing football, that's where the dude thrived in. And obviously he showed it over the course of his career, but the dynamic of going through training camp and getting reps and getting equal reps and watching my competition, my peer, my teammate, um, take that opportunity and run with it and put himself in a great position to become that starter. It was his opportunity to gain, and he did everything he possibly could, and he played to an exceptional level and just brought my level of competition and bar and competition up throughout the entire process. So, once the starter was announced and we get into the first, fourth season, our first 4 games of non-conference, he's playing well. Coach Warren, the offensive coordinator, comes into the mix and he's like, I remember coming into the meeting that day. He's like, "We're going to start creating a package somehow to get you on the field in some way." I was like, "Great." And that element of getting that news was uplifting because that allowed me the opportunity to get on the field.
Yeah.
And I took it and ran with it. And that dynamic of working through that, just like anything we mentioned on this podcast, it was a struggle and it's a challenge. But I think over my career and just my personality is I was always willing to embrace that challenge and get uncomfortable and see how adverse situations could become and how I could use my body of work to respond to that.
Yeah.
And I think that's what allowed me to overcome that challenge was my willingness to embrace that and to become a different and kind of a morph myself into something different. All right.
Mhm.
Obviously, this is going to be a position change where I'm going from quarterback to wide receiver, but everything that I did that got me to where I was as a quarterback, those core principles of hard work, commitment, dedication, taking responsibility, action, doing all those things that I can control, I use those pillars that I crafted myself to become a good quarterback to those same principles to be a wide receiver. So once I found out kind of that news of, we're going to start implementing, I took it and just ran with it.
Yeah.
And um, that my approach to anything was like, I was doing things at a good level, setting a good example for my teammates. I was being the teammate. I was doing everything I was supposed to do, but I always thrived in situations where I wanted something more than good. And it was that point of like going after greatness
Mm.
and achieving. And that the dynamic of going from good to great, it requires this different sense of interest and intensity and urgency in everything you do, where it almost becomes obsessive. And um, that's it sounds weird looking back on it, but my redshirt sophomore year, so it was going into that that year where I was competing with Todd. Something I loved doing was finding odd hours to go and work out. So whether it was a Saturday off season, what I loved to do was, during the offseason, quarterbacks, we'd always get a bag of balls and we'd have them in our locker room. And so odd hours, off hours, those were things that I always thrived on was finding those windows of opportunity where I could go work to get ahead of my competition or my peers or whoever it may be, my opponent. So it was one Saturday night during the off season, 2006. I can remember it. I grabbed the bag of footballs, and this was at the old indoor facility in Shoots. And I would go there Saturday night and grab the bag of footballs and I would just go and throw into trash cans and I would just work. And because that was something I did, like I love repetition. I felt if I could get those reps in over and over and over, I would perfect it. So it was a Saturday night. I went in and shoots, went to the door that is usually open, it's locked. The second one, locked. Boom. Third one that's old faithful. I knew it was always unlocked and it was locked, but I can remember myself hitting and kicking that door so dang hard in anger, knowing that I wasn't going to get those reps in, that, hey, that's that opportunity that I'm not going to get that leg up on competition. So those looking back on it now, it's crazy, but that's that obsessiveness that I had with my work that I wanted to become great. And yeah, granted, it may be selfish, like there's probably bigger implications around that. If something were to have happened in that facility, if I were to get injured, and who's held liable? Is the coaching staff, strength staff? If somebody's held liable. But in those moments, I was so fixated on becoming better, becoming great, and being obsessive towards that there was nothing else that was more important. So those elements of everything that brought me to being a good quarterback, I wanted to recraft those, use those pillars to become a great wide receiver.
So when the opportunity knocked to take on this receiver role and you still have that aspiration of greatness, what in your mind was the definition of greatness at receiver? And had you ever played the position before? Obviously, you watched your brother play tight end, but
Yep.
you don't set out to necessarily become the all-time receptions leader the day Ed Warner says, "Hey, we got a package for you."
Yeah.
But what was greatness to you at that point, and what were the immediate objectives to go
Yeah.
after?
So I always kept my objective simple: do your job. In the at the college dynamics, a little bit different than professionally, but my job, it through a lot of discernment and curiosity, and asking questions, and learning and understanding what it was that I was asked to do. But from there, I was just I developed so much trust and respect from my coaching staff that they're guiding me and coaching me and directing me, educating me towards becoming great. So I put so much trust into them because I had developed enough with them that they're going to put me in the right direction to where something great is going to happen. So again, I kept my objective very simple: do your job. And my perspective and my goal was to fall in love with the process. And the end result was never something that I was always after. I knew if I fell in love with the process and finding those dynamics within that process, that eventually I'm going to get to where I was going to become. And never envisioned, breaking records as a wide receiver or ending up on the cover of Sports Illustrated. Catching a pass was something I never envisioned it, but those little points along the way were just a reflection of the process that I stayed committed to and dedicated towards. That if I continue to go this route, great things are going to come along the way, and I'm okay with that.
The cover of Sports Illustrated. You mean this cover of Sports Illustrated right here? I wanted to ask you about that. We're kind of jumping out of order to go straight to the cover of SI, the catch you made versus Iowa State, but I don't want to say life-changing, but when small town Kansas kid ends up on the cover of the most famous sports publication in the world,
Yep.
it's a pretty big deal. What was that like? Who told you when the issue was coming out they'd chosen that image?
Yeah.
And do you remember that moment when you found out I'm on the cover of SI? You wanna look
So,
at it?
yeah, actually, I just saw one of these last week. These continue to show up in our mail from time to time of fans looking for a signature. So,
And that actually showed up in my mail from David Dorsey. I won't show his address here. He mailed it to me to have you
awesome.
sign
Absolutely.
8 years ago. David, I'm gonna get it done today.
Absolutely.
But yeah,
Yeah.
take me back to the moment you heard you were gonna be on the SI cover.
Yeah, so the moment I heard was, it was the ensuing week after the game. I'd come into the locker room in Heimer, and we had a little small, I guess you can call it a player's lounge, but it was maybe a 6 by 6 where there's a TV on the wall. That was our player's lounge.
Not quite what they have today.
But on the table, there was just a Sports Illustrated with me on the cover. I'm like, "Holy cow, that's me." So, and then obviously there was, I think, a stack of Sports Illustrateds. So from that day forward, I've been signing the Sports Illustrateds. But, that's just a blip in the time,
Right,
right?
right.
It's just a blip in that process where you never know what's going to pop up. For me to have this vision of eventually putting myself or getting captured in a moment of being on the cover of Sports Illustrated is never something that was part of the plan, right? But, again, there's years of work that went into this single moment that
Exactly.
put me into this position to be in this moment of catching a pass against Iowa State on a record-setting season that year.
Pretty incredible. This late November 2007 edition of Sports Illustrated. And of course, the headline, I'm sure many of you remember, Dream Season So Far. And this was obviously, preceding the border war
Yep.
game in Kansas City. We didn't win that game, but it was still a dream season
Yep.
because you go on to win a BCS bowl game,
Mhm.
something that so many prominent programs can't boast, but you guys did. And,
Yeah.
a transformational year in the history of Kansas football. It's only a 45-minute show, so I can't ask you about all the big moments of this one. But if you were to relive some of your favorite moments of that season, including winning in College Station
Hmm.
against the school
Yep.
that pulled the offer,
Yep.
what
Yeah.
were your favorite memories and moments?
I mean, um, there's so many points. I mean, you think about that 2007 season, the entirety of it. It was just this continuing climb, 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 and the mentality of the team was it was always the next opponent, the week to week. It's like if we take care of this one, all right, great. We'll look towards the next Saturday when that time came. And like we found ourselves 4-0 non-conference, and I think the first pivotal game is when we went to K State and played over there in 2007, and back and forth game. Keeb makes a late play to kind of seal the game, but we go over there and win in Manhattan. Talk about momentum carrying, and that's the whole dynamic of sports. Like momentum's one of those things that you're always after. You either have it and you're trying to keep it, or you've lost it, you're trying to gain it back. But at that point, we started carrying a lot of momentum after the K State game. So the pivotal point of winning over there on the road, or going down to College Station, winning down there in a tough atmosphere against a good perennially good Texas A&M squad. I think hanging 70 on Nebraska. That's another good
Huge.
one. That's a big one.
Did Mangino use the A&M backstory as motivation with you? Because Todd sat in that chair and told a similar story where the program had said, "You're one of our secondary options."
Yep.
And Mangino whispered that in his ear as he was warming up before the
Yep.
game, just to give him that extra
Yep.
spark for Sparky.
Yeah. So coach, he never used it pregame, but throughout the week.
Okay.
He had mentioned and referenced it a couple times. So that was something that's always been in my mind. As we're sitting in the studio, I'm looking at this Texas A&M helmet. Um, Not out of disgust, but again, going back to that fortunate that I never had to put that helmet on, because obviously life would be a lot different. But there's always little points and markers along the way, and that's what great coaches do is they
Mhm.
they find those little niches at the right time to, and they understand how people tick.
Yeah.
And Coach Mangino understood how I operated, and he knew you know, kind of planting that seed throughout the week was probably going to be more effective because I'm an individual that builds on experience and like understanding things prior to them happening. So I think he understands like I'm going to plant the seed earlier in the week because I know he's going to ruminate and think about this throughout the week. So when it comes to game time, he's ready to roll. Um, but A&M was a good one. Obviously the game against Iowa State, it kind of set us up and put us in that position to be at Arrowhead, you know, ranked up against Mizzou. Unfortunately, the opportunity, they played a heck of a ball game. Chase Daniels was dropping dimes left and right. They had a great ball game, great club. But then obviously, as how everything unfolded and us finding ourselves in Miami in the BCS Bowl against Virginia Tech, and then just how everything unfolded from there. Uh, Again, going back to that dynamic of like our program that season was built off of the off season that we had. So like the hard work that we put in, there's so much work that went in initially that allowed us to get to the opportunity to play against Virginia Tech, and we knew that we were the underdog, right? This is KU taking on, you know, a Virginia Tech squad, ACC, Frank Beamer, all of
Beamer
them.
ball, yeah.
Oh yeah, and think about and looking back on that roster that Virginia Tech had been, how many of those guys went on and had huge, and some of them, Tyrod Taylor is still playing professionally.
Exactly.
Um,
In your town,
yeah,
New
exactly.
York.
Yeah, New York. Now he's getting a chance again, but there's no, looking at, just the roster itself, it's like, they should have swept us out of the stadium. But we knew that if we stuck to what we were doing, that same mentality that we had all season, if we got to the third and fourth quarter and we were in contention, um, that we would win that ball game because we had put so much work in the offseason. And I can still remember the dynamics of again, going back to like Coach Mangino kind of hinting at things throughout the week. I can remember in team meetings, like he had talked about what Virginia Tech was doing. They had their pads and everything were already in the locker room all week long. They didn't put their pads on one time throughout the entire week of preparation in Miami.
Wow.
But then we're out in Miami in the dead of heat on whatever Tuesday, going 3 hours long, full padded practice, um, conditioning after practice. Like, we were continuing to put the work in all the way up to game day, all the way through.
What kind of mental edge did that give you that maybe you were the tougher team?
Yeah, no, that's what I was saying, like, if we knew that we were in contention and we had a ball game, 3rd or 4th quarter, we would win that ball game because our conditioning was superior to any other program across the country. And the mentality, it's like, we are gonna continue to play with this chip on our shoulder and just continue to prove ourselves, which we've done all season long. We had to continually do that.
Real quickly, when you think back to that night in Miami, you think back to that win, maybe what happened afterwards. Everybody has a
Right.
prominent memory that comes to mind. Daryl Stuckey told the story of biting through an orange with his
Mm,
mouthpiece still in. Reesing had his own stories of the post-game celebrations.
yep.
What's the most prominent memory that comes to mind when you think back to the biggest night in KU football history?
I still have a vivid image of us standing on that stage and not I think the it shows, like, how closely knit we were. I don't think you could put enough players onto that stage safely, and yet we were trying to get I remember grabbing more guys to come up on the stage because that's how close-knit we were. So I
Wow.
have this vivid image of just this stage of, teammates and friends and colleagues all on the stage
Yeah.
together, embracing each other as one,
Yeah.
and there wasn't anybody doing one thing or, somebody on the 50-yard line taking pictures, but everyone was right there, and we knew that this was the last moment that 2017 was ever gonna have, and
Right.
we captured it, like, so I can vividly, recall Coach Mangino holding up an orange or BMAC biting into an orange or Stuckey biting into an orange or people putting the victory shirts on. It's just this overflowing of relief and excitement of, like, not just, 13 games that we had, participated in that season, but it was years and hours of work, again, behind the scenes leading up to that, that gave us the opportunity to be on that stage together as a team.
One more question on that team, that quarterback receiver combination. Obviously, you would go on after that to catch 102 passes, 97 passes. You go on to set the all time record. What became of your dynamic with Todd Reesing, your relationship
Mhm,
from roommates, duking it out at quarterback to now you're his most trusted set of hands?
mhm,
Obviously, Desmond Briscoe, one of the all
mhm.
time greats as well. But describe the relationship and what unfolded over the next couple of years. How would you describe it?
Yeah, so I think the relationship took off in a different way from that point in our career. Going from being, a competition and pushing each other to become better and better daily. Um, Quickly found out and, thankfully, like I said, I've had a long career, but, still to this day, going and playing with Tony Gonzalez in Atlanta and Roddy White and Julio Jones and Matt Ryan,
Yeah.
those guys were exceptional at what they did, but Todd Reesing, pound for pound, was the best football player that I had ever played with. Hands down.
Wow.
Hands down. Just his knack and understanding. Obviously, there's so many intangibles that we carry as individuals, but his ability to play football at such a high level, um, was was something that, it's uncoachable. But, seeing him operate and like I mentioned earlier about his little energy and spark of energy that he carries and harnesses and uses so effectively, um, is something that I always tried to, um use in my artillery as I was going about and being a teammate and trying to, lead by example. But that dynamic of going through 2000, when he came in 2006, 2007, um, just allowed our friendship to flourish.
Mm.
And we started viewing each other as, um, we're the only way we're going to get further where we want to go is if we have each other. And if we're going to sit here and bicker and, you know, use that idea to kind of divide our friendship and relationship and teammate, our program and eventually, is going to continue to, go, not go the direction that we want it. So I use that as an opportunity to, as we had this transformational relationship, but it was also transactional. It's like, we're only going to be as good as we want to be if we start to
Yeah.
work together as a teammate. And,
Wow.
it's the dynamic of working so closely alongside him on and off the field, whether it was off-season conditioning or in the meeting room. Fortunately, I continued to stay in those meeting rooms. So I started to understand Todd's perspective of where he wanted certain things to be on certain plays or certain schemes. So I
Right.
understand the dynamic of what Todd was kind of envisioning so that, once it came to Saturdays and when I was on the field, I understood where Todd was coming from. So that dynamic of it not dividing our friendship, but, it only enriched us and allowed us to flourish on the field together.
Love that. And you seeing the game the way he sees it and knowing where he needed you to be would
Mhm,
help you the next year to go on to catch 14 balls versus Mizzou
mhm.
in the snow, including the game winner. We close it down as we always do with our 2-minute drill. But before we get to that, I referenced earlier biggest win in KU history, a BCS Bowl championship over Virginia Tech, but maybe the favorite win for most Jayhawk fans that were Kerry Meier fans was beating Mizzou the following year in the snow because it's Mizzou. It's the border war in Kansas City, now the border showdown. But your memories of that day, the 14 catches,
Yeah,
106 yards, 2 touchdowns, none bigger than the game winner with the snow
nice.
coming down. Take me back to that day at Arrowhead.
Yeah, as I've kind of noted throughout this conversation, is like, it's that moment, that game was just a reflection of so much stuff that had gone in leading into that. So
Yeah,
obviously throughout the course of the season, with it being with the 12th game of the season, yeah, there's a ton of stuff that happened prior to that, and not just me personally, but throughout the whole entire team. Guys are beat up. You know, a lot of injuries. I had been hampered by a soft tissue injury. My left hamstring was hanging on by a thread, and I had ran on an artificial hamstring. Credit to the athletic training staff, Murphy Grant, Dave Snyder, and them for being able to get me to allow to be on the field from week to week, let alone 12 games later. Kudos to them and credit to them to what they do in their profession. They're continuing to do, but um, so much external, intrinsic, extrinsic stuff that had led up to that moment, to that game where so much work and so much commitment and dedication and sacrifice that had led to that moment, that game, that this was just a, a kind of a dessert to kind of cap the day off. Um, but so, and I think it's the way I look back on it now is like, obviously there's points of reflection, but if that the whole idea of like hard work pays off, that was that feeling and that sensation after that game was okay. That's why you do all this work. That's why you commit to it and take those off Saturday hours and putting that extra work in for that element and that opportunity to have an experience and sensation like that. Like, I've only had a couple times in my life where I've had complete joy and euphoria to
yeah,
the point of tears, like tears of joy. One time it happened, Little League baseball growing up, I had tears of joy after winning a state championship. Again, it was one of those same dynamics. It was a back and forth game. It went extra innings. I think it was like 10 or 12 innings, but we won in the last. There was a grounder. I scored the winning run, but I remember coming across that base and weeping in joy, like that sensation. I had this same feeling and same reaction after the KU Mizzou game of
yeah,
winning that game where I had tears of joy. And it's this like complete feeling, like I said, euphoric, where it's the ultimate high. Like, this is the beautiful part about, yes, life, but sports. So what it can
yeah.
do, it can literally bring you tears of joy, and having that sensation in that dynamic of being against Mizzou in Arrowhead, getting yourself another opportunity to go and play in competition in a bowl game.
Yeah.
Not just that, but it's that those markers along the way that are pushing yes, you're self-forward, but thinking big picture, you're pushing that program forward. Like, you're pushing the KU football program forward. We're in postseason play again. We're going to the insight.com poll to play down there and getting an opportunity to showcase who we are as a team. We're putting that program that much further forward to get us to a point like today where the dynamics of what's being built with KU football now,
Yeah.
I never envisioned that, but I knew those points along the way was gonna give us this opportunity where we get there. So that KU Missouri game was just a capture and that feeling of hard work pays off, and all those dynamics of going through it, the snow, the rain, the back and forth, Philip Strozier blocking the field at the end, like, there's so many moving parts that led to it, but it took exceptional effort internally and externally, guys playing through difficult situations. Todd's beat up, I'm beat up, the entire everyone's beat up at that point, but it's just testing your will, again, going back to that dynamic I talked about with Virginia Tech and KU, in that BCS Bowl. We knew that if we were in contention late in the game, we were gonna win that ball game just
Yeah.
based on our conditioning. We had ourselves in a great opportunity late in the game that we're gonna close this one off because we knew we put that work in.
Man. So easy to say that was your singular favorite moment as a Jayhawk?
Singular favorite moment, hands down, was that one. There's another moment, in my 2006 season. It sounds kinda odd now, but it was the most there it goes, that fly again. It's back. On the road game at Toledo, which we came out on the losing end,
Yeah,
but that
Friday
was
Night Football, right?
yeah, that was the most, eye-opening experience and, developmental experience in my career at that point, when playing at Toledo was more, I think, in la more lasting effect, but as far as, like, those true feelings of joy, of sensation, KU winning that game and having tears of joy, you can't replicate that
And you
anywhere else.
mentioned going to a bowl game. That was the first time of now just 2 times in KU football history that they'd been to
Back to
back-to-back
back.
bowl seasons.
Yep,
You wind up having 20 wins in a 2-year stretch.
yep.
Never been done before. Incredible stuff. Yep. All right, we're gonna close it down as we always do with our 2-minute drill. These are 4 rapid-fire questions. Just first answer that pops in your head. If you wanna expand, you can. We're gonna do it in 2 minutes. Here we go. You switched positions and became one of the all-time greats at receiver, and it's such an amazing story. We chronicled it earlier. If you missed it, go back and listen. If Riesing, though, had to change positions, what in the world would he have played?
Mike linebacker.
Mike linebacker, just blowing dudes up, big time hit after another.
Well, I think so that's kind of the quarterback of the defensive side,
Uh-huh.
and he's that little catalyst that you need in the middle, directing, calling shots, bringing
Okay.
that energy, but also he had a level of physicality to him as well, where I think he would seek a little bit of that contact.
Okay. I like it. I like it. That's not the answer I expected. That's awesome. You mentioned basketball, and for a while, Oral Roberts was recruiting you. You could have taken a very different path in life and been a collegiate basketball player. Who was your favorite hooper growing up? Who was your basketball idol?
Michael Jordan,
Hands down.
hands down,
And
no
there's no
question.
GOAT conversation.
Nope,
I'm with you there
nope,
wholeheartedly.
nope.
The all-time great is MJ. Okay. Next up, you're a dietitian. If you could give us one piece of advice, something we should eat, drink, or ingest that would change our lives forever from the dietitian's perspective,
Yeah,
because you look svelte and like in the best shape of your life, what's your advice?
I give 2 things. I think incorporating blueberries into your diet, but also there's no silver bullet in understanding that. But I think the part that gets overlooked now is staying active in whatever
Yeah.
meaning that may be, whether
Yeah.
it's intentional or if you can form that into your day-to-day way of what you're doing, staying active in some way,
Very good.
physically, mentally, spiritually.
Really well said. And our final one, if you could go back and relive any one day in your life as a Jayhawk, and maybe it's the Mizzou game we just talked about, maybe it's something else, but you could hop in the DeLorean and go back in time and revisit any one day and relive it. What would that one day be?
Um I would say that not even football, but supporting the entire KU program of athletics would be the night after we beat North Carolina in the Final Four in the celebration that ensued on Mass Street
Yeah.
afterwards. Yeah.
Not just because 'cause you're sitting here looking out at that street from our Kansas Station studios, but because you would wanna go back to that party.
Absolutely.
It
I
was
mean,
that great.
it was that great. I mean, the atmosphere, the pure enjoyment, obviously with it being North Carolina and,
Yeah,
a little history there with Coach Williams and whatnot, but it showed the amount of passion and joy
yeah,
and dedication that people have towards KU basketball,
yeah.
and it just put it into, a quick glimpse of the amount of people that came out to celebrate and party and just join in the mix, yeah.
Good
Can't
stuff.
be
Man,
excited.
how much fun has this been today? Kerry Meier, thank you so
Yep,
much. All the great stories, all the
yep,
amazing insights, for being so gracious with your time today. We appreciate it greatly. Make sure you check this guy out. If folks are ever in the New York area,
yep.
you're the number one
Yep,
clinician
there it is,
dietitian in
yeah.
NYC in Manhattan, huh?
And the good part about it is, you don't have to physically be there now. Thankfully to telehealth, I can connect with you wherever.
Okay. But get some blueberries. If you learned anything today, Orange Bowl, yes, but blueberries are going to make you live longer, happier, and healthier. Kerry Meyer, thanks so much,
Yeah,
buddy.
absolutely.
One of my
Thank you.
all-time favorites. Kerry
Yes, sir.
Meyer on this edition of Haney and the Hawks right here on Kansas Nation.